Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Log Tech Live. Really delighted you could join us today. My name is Eric Johnson. If this is your first time catching the show, when I'm not hosting this show, I'm the senior technology editor at the Journal of Commerce, joc.com, where I write about everything and anything logistics technology. We do this show 2 times a month, the first and third Friday of every month at 10 a.m. Eastern, and we have a great time. This is one of my favorite things that I do each week, and so I'm glad you could join us again if this is your first time. If this is not your first episode, welcome back. Thank you so much for supporting this show. I only do it because you all tune in and seem to enjoy it and get some value out of it. So really appreciate all of those people who tune in each and every episode. We have a great guest today. You know, I always try to get great guests. This guy is super, super smart and is hopefully going to help us understand what the heck AI actually is and why it's meaningful in the world of logistics. So, got flowers behind me. It's spring. And here in DC, the weather has turned crazy hot, so I had to switch to iced coffee from my hot coffee. That's the kind of transitional season we're in here in DC. But really excited about the next couple of months. I am going to actually be in New Orleans in 2 weeks for our Break Bulk and Project Cargo conference, the Journal of Commerce's Break Bulk and Project Cargo conference. You can still sign up to register to attend in New Orleans. Come on, do I have to beg people to go to New Orleans? It's such a fun city. Use the code EricJ25 to get 25% off. I'll be leading a couple sessions there. One on technology, obviously, one on kind of the energy transition and how that's impacting the Break Bulk and Project Cargo space. Super interesting. Will be a great event. Attendance is way up over last year, so come and join the party both in and out of the conference. Hope to see you there. Also wanted to give my every show plug for the blended pledge. I know you guys are probably tired of hearing me say this, but someone needs to own this cause. Basically, the blended pledge is supporting underrepresented voices in the logistics industry, helping them get the budget that they need to travel to events, to speak at events, so that the on-site events start to look a little bit more like the actual world and not a old boys club. So you can donate $5, you can donate $1 million, but maybe get your company involved and say, let's be the face of this cause and really go all in and sponsor it. The link is in the comments, as you just saw on the banner going across. I've been off this week from JOC, so I'm a little bit in vacation mode right now, but still delighted to join you. I wasn't going to take a week off of the episode because this is too much fun. And also, even while I was gone, there was a ton of news that was happening. So I'm going to highlight a few stories. Actually, only one JOC story that came out this past week. Let's bring up the first story. So this is a story I wrote last week, and it relates to something that came up a lot at TPM Tech in February. Excuse the beeping. That's food that's getting prepared behind me. This is an issue that came up at TPM Tech a lot. And so I took a bunch of really interesting comments from a couple panels around investments that forwarders need or want or feel pressured to make in technology, and sort of talked about how whether the rate environment this year, which is obviously way down from last year, sort of more in line with a typical down year in the industry, but looks like it came off of the top of a roller coaster hill based on what happened in 21 and early 22, and sort of examine whether the current rate environment supports investment in tech the way that the last couple of years did, where there was a lot of money going around, margins were a little expanded. So really encourage you to check out this story on joc.com because there's just a ton of great insight, and it's super relevant to our discussion today because we're going to be talking about how forwarders can kind of view investments into AI specifically. So next story. This is from my friend Emma Cosgrove at Insider, who had a scoop this week about American Eagle Outfitters. They made a lot of big splash during the pandemic by trying to create this entity called Quiet Logistics that was essentially going to be a 3PL, an internal 3PL that also served other retailers. And a very technology focused one at that. And the guy who led the charge on this is out, as Emma reported, based on an internal memo that she got access to. So definitely encourage you to read that. My take on this is it was an interesting idea. It's also not one that hasn't been thought of before. I can remember 10, 15 years ago hearing about or reading consultants suggesting that Walmart needed to take an initiative like this, where they had all this warehousing space and they had all this internal supply chain and logistics prowess, and if it was only serving Walmart's needs, they were only getting a certain amount of value from it. And did they need to sort of turn around and offer like a neutral kind of logistics service to companies that could take advantage of their network and take advantage of their assets and their expertise? That never really got off the ground for whatever reason. Maybe because Walmart didn't want to sort of sacrifice any competitive edge it has. Obviously, Amazon's tried something similar to this, and I think Quiet was an attempt to create a bulwark against Amazon so that retailers didn't feel that they were, sort of jumping in bed with Amazon to help them on the logistics and supply chain side. So super interesting stuff. We'll see where it goes from here, but definitely encourage you to read Emma's reporting here at Insider. Next story. Another one from good friend Sam Chambers at Splash. He just put this out, I believe, yesterday, trying to answer one of the container shipping industry's biggest mysteries, which is exactly what did MSC make last year, and never mind what they've made over time. They're super secretive. They don't release anything around financials, not even any hint of anything around financials. All we know is that they have drastically increased the size of their fleet to the extent that they shot past Maersk as the biggest container shipping line in the world. I believe I read something, this may have even been in JOC, that their order book, in other words, the number of ships or the amount of capacity that they have on order, is bigger than Hapag-Lloyd's existing fleet, and Hapag-Lloyd is not a small carrier. So very interesting, and so definitely encourage you to read this. It's some, they sort of reverse engineer what they estimate MSC might have made based on sort of going profitability and container revenue from other lines that do have to report publicly. So great little piece here from Sam. And then the last one I'll just mention, because this is super related to the discussion I'm about to have with our guest. Last Friday, my LogTech letter explored this idea that AI is this big, requires this big leap of faith to jump into. And or I should say automation. I don't want to get those two confused, and we're going to go into that in a second. But my take in the newsletter was that automation shouldn't be seen as the leap of faith. Not investing or not researching or not understanding what automation means to your business, that is the leap of faith. If you believe that you don't need to be, if you can, sort of bury your head in the sand on this, right? It's not to say that everything needs to be automated or can be automated, but if you're not investing the time, money, and in software that is handling, is sort of building automation capability, you're probably going to turn around and look around and go like, how did we get so far behind, right? So definitely check out the newsletter. No newsletter this week for those of you who are waiting for it. Sorry, vacation. My brain was on vacation too, so no newsletter. But with that, it's a perfect intro to bring on my guest this week, Gaurav Bajaj, who is a CEO and founder at Solvo.ai. Gaurav, so glad you could join us today. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Eric. Very glad to be here. Thanks a lot for inviting me.
Of course, absolutely. We had this, when we first talked, I had this sort of like on the calendar at some point in spring. So really excited we're getting to chat, and we got to meet at TPM Tech. Really appreciate you coming out for that. You're based in London, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Great. So maybe can you give us a little bit of a background on yourself first, and then maybe what exactly is Solvo?
Absolutely. So a little bit of myself. So my background, I'm a mechanical engineer by trade. Used to design steam turbines, nuclear turbines. Previous job, turned into a strategy management consultant, and then ended up founding Solvo.ai back in 2021. So as they say, I'm a sketcher and cyclist by heart. I'm an Arsenal, Manchester, and Mercedes Formula One fan by passion. A lot of This is a great time for us because we are top of the league from an Arsenal perspective. So I'm really cherishing it at the moment. And literally, the sun is also shining in London. So my journey has taken me from north part of India, where I grew up, to Germany, where I was working on the shop floor with Siemens back in the day, to the warehouses of the remotest parts of the UK. And I ended up in the AI capital in Europe, which is Cambridge, where I met my co-founder and all the clever people I work with. So a bit of an outsider among all the bright people who are changing the industry, who are building new technology, and people who are watching this live or who have a recorded version on hand. So I'm pretty humbled to be here in your company, Eric. It was great to meet you and also hear all the new ideas that were coming at the conference in TPM Tech as well. So that also kind of pushed us to start having more wider conversations with some of the new colleagues that we met on how we could make a small change in the industry. So that's a little bit about me. About Solvo.ai. So Solvo.ai is a logistics AI SaaS business that is helping industry leaders with decision intelligence. So we help them do two things. One is help them, and very simple two things, right? One is to help them drive high yields, and second is to build resilience in their supply chains, right? As we know, there has been constant disruption over the last few years, and the margins are getting squeezed. Of course, everybody has seen the freight rates where they were last year compared to where they are right now. So everybody's feeling that pain. And what we help them is remove a little bit of pain using some application of a real world AI. So our vision from a business perspective is to become the decision intelligence engine for global logistics. A really grand vision, but we'll go through a step at a time. And to realize that vision, our first product is a price optimization engine, which we offer to our revenue and pricing managers and help them apply optimal pricing strategies to make sure that they can achieve their business KPIs at the end.
And
And this, yeah.
And this is you're targeting the forwarding industry.
Yes, absolutely. So these are
any particular size or across the board?
Yeah, cross board. So we work with companies anywhere from making 500 million to up to 40 billion in revenue per year. So very wide spectrum, because everyone across the industry is facing the same challenges around the changing market conditions, the volatility that we have in the market, and of course how the customers' buying behaviors are also moving all over the place, right? So how do we learn and adapt? And that's the kind of small difference that we are making within the from our perspective.
That's super interesting. I mean, I think you're working in an area that to me has been the most interesting part to cover over the past few years, which is the procurement side of things, because there's the technical side, and then there's the sort of sociological side, right? And like, are they moving in alignment? Absolutely not. But there is more movement on that behavioral side than I think even people probably realize, right? People are more open to different structures of contracts. They're more open to dynamic kind of environments, not fully yet, but they're open to testing those out. So can I ask why I mean, given your background, why specifically logistics? Why specifically this area, and why focus on what you chose to focus on at the outset?
Absolutely. Great question. I think so. There are quite a few things that brought us to this place. Of course, some of that mechanical engineering background, and then working in the AI industry for a bit and doing a little bit of consulting, always focusing on how we can improve the performance and um, reduce inefficiencies and extract the inefficiency out of the system. So that has always been a kind of a theme so far. And over the last few years, the AI has advanced so much, and we started to believe that now is the right time for us to move away from all the Excel models and manual processes that we have in place and start leveraging the data as we have. So for the folks who are listening in, I think it's not a surprise for you all that global logistics is an over $10 trillion dollar economy, right? So it is growing at a CAGR of around 6.5% every year. But despite it being the backbone of global trade, it has been like systematically been underserviced by the tech industry, right? Because people did not find it quite attractive to come and work in the environment. And I think that things are changing now, right? So the industry is seeing more and more tech people getting involved and starting to build applications which directly make an impact on the top and the bottom line. And but still we see, and from personally, what is important for us from a Solvo perspective is that we see three main challenges in the industry, right? So first is the lack of resilience. So if you see all the existing rule-based models or processes that are in place, they really lost out when the COVID came in, and when the all the fluctuations and the volatility and the uncertainty got introduced in the market. And this is also quite relevant how this topic has become so important that the World Economic Forum, so they release a global risk report every year, where they outline what are the biggest challenges that we as a global economy face. And to put things into perspective, in 2021, they mentioned supply chain only 6 times. And in 2023 report, that is mentioned 36 times,
Mm.
right? So there's a six-fold increase, cementing how center stage this topic is taking at the current world. The second one is, of course, inefficiency. So there, by some estimates, the lack of digitization is responsible for around $1.9 trillion worth of inefficiencies into the logistics sector. And from a sustainability perspective, right, which is so much important for all of us right now, and which need to focus on. And again, it's not a surprise, but when I started to read a little bit about it, that the 20% of our global CO2 emissions are coming from this sector. So if we don't address these inefficiencies right now, the target of having net zero will continue to elude us as a society. So we started looking at these big kind of meta challenges and started reflecting on how can we start making one step at a time towards addressing some of these issues, right? The data is enough available at the moment with the freight forwarders and across the industry, because every organization has gone through the digitization, or they're going through a digitization. And of course, COVID has helped us nudge into that direction. It has been the biggest kind of change management lever, as per se.
Mhm.
Um, but it also created another issue that with COVID, all the historical data becomes quite irrelevant because the market has changed, right? So how do you learn from the data? So what we taking that into consideration, we thought that it is very important for us to build data efficient and adaptable models. So something we don't need millions and millions of data points, but they are quite agile and adaptive, and they can learn from the market. And hence, we brought together a team of AI researchers, mathematicians, and logistics experts from all over the world. So my team, as we were discussing before the show as well, they're spread in all the time zones, just leveraging the best of the minds to build decision making intelligence and decision making technology, and usher the industry into the let's say the new horizon. And that's where I would always believe in what, like say Pluto said, our need will be the real creator of the future. So hence there was a need in the market, and we thought we are quite primed with the technology development that we've done to come out and address this.
Super interesting. And we did. We were talking a bit about some of the background of some of your team, which is not all logistics focused. So it's interesting to get that sort of cross pollination aspect. So I think, I see myself a bit as like a proxy for an industry that is staring all of this interesting technology right in the face, and sort of it looks like a language that they don't speak, but they also feel like they need to learn how to speak it. So can we maybe simplify things down and say what is a and let me back up, actually, right? Chat GPT is everywhere in the news right now. It must have been said 100 times on stage at TPM Tech. Not I want people to understand what you're working on is not generative AI. It's not chat GPT related specifically. But the AI is now firmly in the sort of public's consciousness. So what is, given that, what does it mean to the world of logistics? Can you sort of help people understand what AI actually means?
Yeah, so artificial intelligence from our perspective, from how we see it, has a potential to revolutionize this logistics industry. And again, coming back to the same theme that we were talking about earlier, by improving efficiencies, reducing costs, and helping us make better decisions, right? That's essentially what AI is supposed to do.
Yep.
Um, we very much believe from at Solvo.ai that AI is not good if it cannot help you make better choices, right? And help you understand the consequences before you make that choice as well, right?
Mhm.
So, when we talk about the wider AI spectrum, and we've seen the email and the big reports coming out around pausing the AI development, which is, like you said, is going in a different spectrum altogether. What we are here talking about is looking at the real application, and in terms of the decision making side, right? uh, it can operate, AI can operate as a second brain, and or act as a co-pilot, right? By doing kind of three, let's say, key things, right? So one is, it can help us analyze vast amounts of data, right? Millions of data points. I was in a discussion with one of the key indices team this week, and they are getting up to 8 to 10 million data points, right? So it's quite difficult for anyone to build systems which can use that data points and try to understand and gather insights and extract insights out of it, right?
Yep.
The second one is learning and recovering from disruptions faster, right? So we all have our constraints, where we can, one is understand from the data, but also how many trade-offs can we have in our mind, right? So you think about a multi-objective optimization, and where you have 10 different factors that you have to understand and optimize in your head, and say, what is the impact this is going to have if I make X, Y, or Z decision? So it's all around learning faster. And that's the third, which is the most important bit as well, is offering greater visibility and control over operations, right? So we've seen that there is a lot of investment has gone into new tech solutions which give you understanding of where the product is in the value chain, right? All of us do see it from an Amazon perspective, right? When we order stuff, it's dispatched, it's packed, and it's sent over. But how do we use that data to better service the end customers and control the operations if there is a disruption that happens? And these are the three things. And why is it even more important right now, and why is AI more important in logistics spaces? That the supply chain disruptions, through some of the studies, they are becoming more and more regular, as we all know. Also, with the climate change, geopolitical issues that we have, and they are expected to last a month or longer every 3.5 years, right? Logistics industry as a whole operates on a very low margin basis, right? So this means that every 3.7 years, the companies are expected to lose around 1 year's worth of EBITDA, right? If you're losing that much amount of money, it becomes an existential crisis for the businesses, right?
Interesting.
So it's very important for us to kind of think about, and businesses are already taking that um, steps to move and transition from the traditional just-in-time processes to more like a resilience first models,
Hmm.
right? So we saw the challenges of just-in-time when the COVID hit and all the supermarkets ran out of toilet rolls, right? So everybody was scrambling on it. Um, and I moved to a new place and I ordered furniture. It took them 9 months to deliver something to me, right? So there are, everyone has personal stories, right, to how they felt during that COVID period, and the supply chains was struggling to meet to customers' expectations. And hence, how do we continue to build that resilience into our supply chains, and make sure that we can leverage the best of the AI, what AI has to offer us. And this kind of level of, let's say, the self-healing element, where AI can learn itself and understand, the models can learn, of course, with human supervision involved, because that's how we build our models. Helps us
Human in the loop, I think.
absolutely, to just help and provide that kind of input and information and insights for the logistics operators and the supply chain experts to make the right decisions, right? And to achieve this, we applied some of our state-of-the-art data efficient algorithms, and through the case study, we looked at our product was able to recover with as little as 24 data points, right? So we introduce a disruption into the system and say, okay, let's just see how the algorithms operate. Now, in realistic world, it's very hard to kind of recover that quickly, right? You would need 50 people sitting in a room, in a war room, and scrunching through the data. Yeah. And an algorithm can help us move into the right direction. And that's where I personally believe, from a second brain, a co-pilot perspective, is where the AI can really help.
What would be like a specific example? That's a great, by the way, I think, driver in terms of the sustainability side, the and kind of the monetary driver to sort of help navigate disruption that's coming faster and faster. What would be an example of a process where AI would help make it more efficient? I mean, I'm guessing you're going to focus on something around pricing, right? Optimization. But what, like, give us an example that someone who knows nothing about AI would understand.
Yeah, so from an AI perspective, right, so we can have numerous examples, right, where practical applications where even in our previous life with another startup, we were doing similar stuff around demand forecasting, right, route optimization. There's already stuff around predictive maintenance,
yeah.
Understanding, which inventory should go where, right? Amazon has its own emulator, right? So they have a global model of their supply chain where they run the analysis on and say, okay, how is my whole network going to react if we change some of the nodes in this, right? If we move the inventory around so that we can service each other and all the customers better. So there is already some of that application in place, which we don't see from a daily basis. But also there is also, and I think we need to recognize that there is also a lot of hype, AI hype in logistics, right?
Right. Everybody does AI.
Exactly, right? Yeah. And it's good and bad, right, in both sense, because it helps us talk about the practical applications and then think about, moving us towards generating value, right? So from the conversations that I have had with some of the companies in the industry, there is very little real AI being deployed, right, to drive the outcomes and impacts. The most AI that is being used is from pattern generation or cleaning up the data, right, to find some insights. But what we believe is it's more important to transition that and translate that towards a decision and the impact side of things, right? And no wonder the industry is also struggling to move from the pilot to kind of enterprise adoption, right? Because there's a massive gap between the promise and the value.
Right.
And why that comes in, because as we talked about earlier, right, the industry has very low margins that they operate on. So they don't have the luxury or the flexibility that you have with other industries, where they can invest some money, try and see how this works. And then if it does not work, they are still protected by the margins that come across from the remainder of the business. So there is a little bit of, I think, a chicken and egg that comes into from an AI application perspective as well.
For
right?
Sure.
And during the COVID, right, and the pandemic, we were seeing that that the global ordering, the procurement, the demand predictions, they were all coming under so much stress, right? And there wasn't any real-time ability for us to kind of adapt and learn from the market. And that is, of course, a challenge where there were claims around that there is AI embedded into the systems. But if there was, then we wouldn't have been facing those issues, right? And there was still a lot of reliance on the rule-based systems.
Well, that I want to get to that more, but before, because I think that's crucial also, right? Like what is and what isn't and what's sold and as
Mm.
AI, but before that, I did want to ask, this is something, and not to compare blockchain to AI at all,
Mm.
right? They're totally different in terms of utility, in terms of value. Um, AI is essentially going to be a part of everything. Blockchain has very specific use cases, right? But one thing that I found interesting in covering both is both of these things to me seem to be very behind the scenes, like technical plumbing from a programming perspective that for whatever reason have percolated up to the public consciousness, right? Like we never, when we first started using the internet, people without a coding programming background didn't know what HTML was, didn't know what all of the stuff that makes the internet work, right? Like unless you cared about it and you learned about it, you wouldn't have any idea. You just got on your computer and typed a few characters and magic happened. Why do all of a sudden we care about the plumbing, the architecture in ways that we didn't before?
Yeah, I think there is always, whenever there is, let's say, new technology which is going to be a new breakthrough, right, and changes the paradigm of the overall space, um, then we always have a tendency to kind of think about it and discuss about it, and that comes to the fore, right? So all those, I remember when the Terminator movie came back in the day, it was all about robots will come over and take over the
Yeah,
world.
Skynet, right?
Exactly. And I think it's always good because these discussions help us build in some of the bring in some governance structure as well, right? Because we start thinking about what is the AI that would help us as end users or the beneficiaries of the technology, right? Rather than just focusing, like you said, from a plumbing perspective, right? Um, it
Care
is.
about we care about the temperature of the water, not the path that it traveled, right? Like that's the way I think about it. So
Yeah, absolutely, right. And with every new development, right, so it is becoming more and more accessible, right, so to people who are not programmers, right. So it is already helping people automate tasks, provide some insights, recommendations, and of course driving innovation, right. So we've seen from um, algorithms which can review x-rays, right, products that can be tested for any cracks in potentially in products that are going and offering to the market, right? Looking at the bridges and old structures, right? So there's already a lot of work that is happening behind the scenes, and ChatGPT recently is a great example, right? So it's a great example for us, very beneficial for us as startups, right? Like who have very limited resources around how we can develop and understand
yeah,
and define the right processes for ourselves.
accelerate product development, accelerate learning of a market. Yeah, and
Exactly.
your point is actually super interesting. Is ChatGPT again is a good example of like a tool that a dozen people I know who have zero programming experience, but they've played around with it and they now have a better understanding of how this stuff works, and so this has to start percolating into work life too as well, right? Where
Yes.
you're using tools that you ordinarily would have no idea how to use, but they're simpler to use.
Yeah. And I was personally using it like before we having a conversation and said, okay, we are a small startup, right? And we are growing and
Yeah,
hiring new people and bringing them on board. I want to define an SOP which can help me look at my recruitment structure, right? Or help me define a job description with certain elements, right?
right.
And as a small like business, we can't afford a lot of consultants and say, okay,
Right.
this chat GPT tools helps me right away. I was with a friend of mine in Hamburg this week, and he's building his new website for his business. And he's been writing the content for his business for last 1 month. So he wrote like 4 pages of content that he wants to put on the website. And then I went on the chat GPT and said, okay, because we do want to do a really good SEO optimization, these are the keywords that need to come into the whole document. So chat GPT, can you just help us write this structure, write a website content with these words 5 times spread across the web page, and boom, 10 seconds later it's already there. And he had his hand in his heads and he was like, it took me a month to write all this content. There's a small business, how powerful that is, right? And what you can achieve with this, right? So that's the kind of practical applications. And I think one of the things that becomes quite relevant, and what we've seen from we because we've done a lot of surveys with end users, because there's always that notion of, is AI going to disrupt the industry, is going to take jobs, or how it's going to help us?
That was going to be you stole my next question. This I was going to ask is, AI replacing people, right? Like, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I wanted to get to that, right? So yeah, go ahead.
No, absolutely. And we were just having the conversation. So some of the feedback that was coming in, and every single person that we interviewed, so we hired an external agency to do some market research for us.
Yep.
And people want to just understand what is under the hood, right? They want to move from a black box to a white box approach. Once they understand how we are coming up with a recommendation, then there is essentially no barrier to adoption.
Yeah,
right?
The trust is there.
Absolutely. And as much as there is, let's say we put a responsibility on the end users to understand the tech, it from a tech provider perspective, it is also our responsibility to explain it and make it more accessible for people, right? And that's the one of the key tenets that we have as a business, right? So we want to make sure, and all the technology that we are building is taking and keeping human in the loop and right in the center of whatever we built, right? For example, our optimization engine churns through millions of historical data points. It combines it with the market indices, learns from market feedback, how the market is going, right? How much volatility or uncertainty there is in the market, and then it generates, combines it with the business targets, right? What you want to achieve as a business, and then churns out and generates price recommendations for pricing managers, right? Or the trade managers or revenue managers in the industry. However, what we don't do is offer that directly prices to the market, because at the end of the day, what is important for your business has to be defined by people who are running the business, right? They are the decision makers. They are the ones who know the trade-offs. Yeah. So these key experts, they would apply those trade-offs. They would look at what KPIs to optimize, and then they pass on that price to the customers, right? Just to make sure that right value and the right service level is achieved by offering these packages to their end customers. And for us, it becomes very important that we continue to build technology which can operate in this co-pilot mode, right? We are already doing it, right, from so many years, using navigation apps, right, to get to our destination quicker and save us fuel or time or whatever that is. And that looks and appears very seamless, right? And similarly, this is also something that we need to bring into the workforce, where we combine the capabilities of the machine and the faster processing times and ability to learn and adapt with the intelligence and the know-how and the expertise that the logistics experts have, and combine them together to build a really powerful, let's say, team. And at the end of the day, I think it's the personal chemistry, or maybe not really that personal, but a personal chemistry between the AI and operators would be quite key on defining and developing competitive edge against anyone else in the market, right?
It's interesting the way you describe that. The idea that AI sort of replaces people is like the ultimate loaded question, right? It's like yes and no, of course. Like, of course, we all recognize there are jobs that people do that have to be done right now that are incredibly boring and are not interesting, and people aren't necessarily even good at it. They just have to do it because programs weren't there to do it. But it's not as though there are not other things that can be done and maybe built upon once those things are in the hands of a system or a program, right? So, like with everything in life, if you look at things as a binary question, like you're bound to be super happy or super upset, whereas it's somewhere in the middle, right? And you have to figure out like how to unleash this to sort of like amplify the work and value of people rather than replace them. So sorry, I'm just editorializing.
No, absolutely. And I think, again, it becomes like an it depends answer, right? Like I said,
Yeah,
it's in the gray, right in the middle. It depends on the application and what you're trying to achieve with this, right?
yeah, yeah.
If there is a lot of like a data crunching and finding insights and finding patterns from the data, do we really care about doing that work and writing and updating our Excel models every few days, right?
Right.
Which is realistically impossible. So if you look from a just from a freight forwarding industry, right, and all the customers that we've been speaking with, compared to last year, right now they are receiving 5x the number of quote requests, right? So how is it even you cannot physically bring in and expand your workforce 5 times, right?
Right.
In a click of a button,
Nor should you.
right? Or should you, right? And it becomes quite and again the rationale behind is that everybody is shopping around, right? So the customers are also becoming quite smart and they send out multiple cost requests.
Right.
The amount of money that is or let's say the value at the stake at the end is still remains the same,
Yeah.
but to address that value you cannot increase your cost of goods sold in that sense by 5x, right? So you need to think
And
about
there's an inverse relationship monetarily too, right? The more active the volume of quotes is, the lower the margins are likely to be too,
absolutely.
right? So it's a huge crunch. I have two more questions, and we're running short on time. I just want a quick. I've asked this to a couple people who work in AI and automation before, but I would love your take. If I'm sitting in the seat where I'm making a decision between a couple different systems that are trying to accomplish the same thing, and both the sales reps are telling me we are an AI powerhouse, how do I determine what is good versus great, good versus average? Like what are a couple clues that I might use to help manage that?
I think one of the most important things, and that was the core tenet of when we set up Solvo.ai, is AI is as good as the decisions it can help us make, right? So if you cannot demonstrate the impact of what your product is doing, I think it loses a plot right away, right? So for me, it becomes a bad AI, right? However, there are other things and aspects which are equally important, right? The first one, from a good AI perspective, is the transparency and explainability, right? Like we talked about earlier, because there's always a lot of challenge on adoption side. So you want to make sure that you build trust in the system
Yeah.
and you explain the logic and use that kind of white box approach to make sure that people are comfortable with using the applications, right? And that becomes a key thing. The second one is the user first design, right? So we need to have the user in the center and always make sure that the system that we are building has and allows human intervention to come into play, right? So
The person who's using the product needs to be the determiner of whether it's good, not the IT person who's sort of maintaining the instance.
exactly, right? So even in Chat GPT, right, when you ask for something on the top right corner, there is a thumbs up and thumbs down, right? So it's getting a reward signal and a feedback, right? So
Yeah,
that's exactly the same
got it.
technology that we use in our platform, which is from a reinforcement learning perspective, which is we understand and give the models rewards or penalties based on how users are feeling while working with it, right?
Got it.
And if it is not that great, then and if they're not solving a purpose, then becomes a challenge, right, for us
Yeah.
as an end user, right? So it has to solve a purpose at the end of the day. The next one is the performance and the accuracy, right? So how there should be a consistency in AI being able to deliver accurate results, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not taking let's say a pot at ChatGPT, but sometimes you would go in and ask a question and it start
Which is
asking
a
different ways.
wildly wrong answer.
You
Yeah.
get different answers, right? but it has to be consistent in terms of and especially from a business application perspective. That personal life is absolutely fine if you want to read some articles and gather
Yeah.
some knowledge, but when you have to make critical decisions which will directly impact your top and the bottom line, then you need to make sure that the performance and the accuracy is quite consistent, right?
Yeah.
And last but not the least is the security, right? And then the privacy of the data, right? So we making sure that the AI system has robust security measures, and we can protect the sensitive data. And hence, what we do is we keep our customers' data completely separate and have completely separate instances, so that there is, let's say, no leakage of any information across the channels, right? And have a proper compliance. I think those are the kind of four key tenets that are quite important. And if
That,
you flip these around, then they become bad as well.
yeah.
Right? Similar
Yeah.
ones.
No, those are great. I hate to cut you short because this is fascinating. I'm like learning so much. We are running up against time. Gaurav, great suggestions, by the way. I hope people were taking notes or watch this on demand to go back, and because those are all fantastic, sort of recommendations to help someone in a non-technical, persona understand better, like delineate between different products, especially when there can be obviously a gap between sales and delivery, right? So, Gaurav, last question. Ask this of all guests. You only have like 15 seconds. So, who's your favorite musician or band, and why?
Uh, it has to be Beatles. I'm an old school. I'm like an old heart, right?
I mean, never a
And
wrong answer. So,
and always and I think that song "Hey Jude," that's my personal favorite because it brings the whole communities together, and especially when you're on a Sunday roast in a pub, and you can all sing together, and the tune comes on, and everybody's joining in. And we also used to use this song in our football stadium for a couple of our players. So there's so many different renditions. So yeah, Beatles has
but
to.
now it's for Arsenal. Now it's everyone sings tequila to Saliba, right? So,
Yes.
Gaurav,
Exactly.
thank you so much. This has been fantastic. I need to go back and watch this myself to make sure I got all the little pearls of wisdom you dropped here. But really appreciate your time, and definitely, what's the best way for people to reach out to you?
First of all, thanks a lot for inviting me to the show, and for sharing the thoughts. We're trying to change things in a
Yeah.
by taking big baby steps, right? And
Yep.
take away the misnomers. Yeah, so we are on the website Solvo.ai, or you can directly reach out to me. It's Gaurav at Solvo.ai, GAURAV at SOLVO.ai.
And LinkedIn too. You're on
LinkedIn as well, right? So, and we would be happy to have a chat and conversation and take it offline as well if anybody's interested to delve a little bit deeper in the topics.
Cool. Well, Gaurav, thank you so much. Look forward to chatting more, and definitely reach out if you have any questions about AI or anything that Salvo's doing. Thank you so much
Thank you,
for
everyone.
taking time. Have a great weekend. Okay, we ran over. Sorry, that was dense. A lot of ground to cover, and hopefully you all learned a little bit. I definitely did. I need to, like I said, I need to rewatch that. It's dad joke of the week time. My son just sprung this on me. I don't think he made it up, but I literally laughed out loud. What's Switzerland's biggest contribution to math? I don't know, but the flag is a big plus. Come on, that was good, right? That was good. So in any case, thank you everyone for tuning in, for staying over time. I had a fantastic discussion, learned a lot. Hope you all did too. Please reach out with show ideas, feedback, constructive or otherwise. Would love to hear from you. I'm on Twitter, Substack, LinkedIn, email. You know where to reach me. In any case, someone sign up and own the blended pledge, please. We need to get that supported. Hopefully see you all in New Orleans in a couple weeks, but if not, I understand. But I will be back in 2 weeks with another great show and another great guest. So thank you to Sarah at Let's Talk Supply Chain team. Thank you to Nicole, the world's best show producer. And thank you all, most importantly, for showing up for today's episode of Logitech Live, and see you in a couple weeks. Have a great weekend, everybody.